for the first of many, many, many interviews that we will be having for the HAPI film. We have the great one here. Professor Smalls needs no introduction. We are going to talk about the HAPI film and what it means to the universe today at this time. Professor Smalls.
Yes, sir.
Quick question for the people who don't know. Can you define for us HAPI and what it means from an ancient African aspect?
Okay. HAPI is the name of the Nile River. And this name implies that the river is the very source of the civilization. That this Nile River, that is called by the ancient HAPI, bring the sustenance into the Nile Valley. I mean, when you're in the air and you're looking down, you see this blue ribbon running through the middle of this brown desert. And it's almost macabre figuring out, wow, desert. But there's this blue ribbon running from the south to the north. And what this ribbon is doing is bringing the black soil from the mountains of inner Africa that becomes the fertile ground to create the great agriculture that produces the initial wealth for Kemet itself. The river also becomes the transportation network that runs all the way from southern Africa to the Mediterranean. A lot of times we talk about HAPI, the Nile River, and we talk about the blue Nile coming out of Ethiopia or the white Nile coming out of Uganda. But the truth is the source of the Nile goes all the way back to Lake Nyanza, which they call Victoria. And Lake Victoria is fed by all of the rivers of Congo, Malawi, and Mozambique. So the Nile is coming from all over Central and Southern Africa, moving north. So the HAPI River, the Nile River, was the source of Africans' cultural integration, spiritual integration, economic development, political development that came about to manage the economic development, and thus the spiritual, cultural development that begins to govern all of that. And the Nile was the stimulus and the source for all of the economic, political, and cultural and spiritual development that would take place in Northeast Africa, in the area we now call Kemet, or Egypt, Sudan, Uganda, Ethiopia. All of this is integrated to one another by the HAPI River.
Powerful, powerful. Tell us why this documentary is important right now, today.
Yes. Today, the African world is in an economic depressed situation. Though we have all the wealth of the world, the gold, the diamond, the cobalt, the coltan, the oil, the manganese,
right,
the bauxite, we are living in dire poverty because we don't know the formula that our ancestors left for us, that they learned from the ecology that was created by the Nile. So the Nile is a physical river, but at the same time, the study of it will give us a principle of understanding on how to reconstruct an economic phenomena that will produce the wealth that can create the kinds of civilizations that our ancestors once built. And so by studying the Nile, and as the film shows, and seeing its centrality to economic development and the principles that our ancestors developed around things economic, political, and cultural, we can begin to replicate that in the environments and ecology we find ourselves in today. And this film, which is excellent in the way it goes into our history, which really all of what we're calling the history of the Nile Valley is the result of the presence of the HAPI. You see, without the HAPI, there is no temples. Without the HAPI, there is no fields of barley and wheat and cotton. Without the HAPI, there's no fish. Okay? And so the HAPI says, historically to us, you need an economic stream that is the resources for your economic growth and expansion. And so we may not have a river literally running through, say, Harlem, but what we have is the concept of what that river did. How can we find that tool today that represents what the river symbolizes and use that tool, that resource mechanism to develop the economic, politics, and culture that will lift our people out again.
What I'm hearing is we have the model already.
We have the model.
We just have to study and apply the model.
Absolutely.
That's it.
Absolutely.
So the film is going to teach us where we were and where we can be again.
And the relevance of the essential source of your economic development. So the river has always played a significant role. So you can say the Volta River is a happy river today if used appropriately. Or we can go into Senegal, and then we'd be looking at in Nigeria, and we'd be looking at the Niger River. Which without the Niger River, there's no commerce in that part of Africa, for Nigeria, for Senegal, for Mali. So the Niger River becomes a happy river. It's not just a body of water. It is an essential resources for trade and commerce. It's essential resources for refertilizing the land. It's an essential resources for harvesting protein to feed your population. Because at the end of the day, the most essential need any community requires is to provide food, clothing, shelter, safety, and security. And at the center of this in Nile Valley, in supplying the food, clothing, shelter, safety, was this river.
Right. I hope you're taking notes because you're getting schooled right now. We are in school right now. So grab your pen, grab your paper, take some notes, and don't forget, subscribe below. But after seeing this documentary, what do you want us to take from it?
Well, the one extraordinary thing about this documentary, you have the greatest collection of contemporary scholars on ancient Kemet in this documentary. I've never seen another documentary that had this level of scholarship from all different spheres, from the economic space, from the archaeological, the anthropology, the linguistics, the political, the cultural. And these people are at the top of their game and understanding ancient Kemet and the ancient HAPI Valley civilization that was produced in ancient Kemet. And what people need to get from this is that you must systemically understand how to organize yourself around the essential elements that produces your economic foundation.
Wow, powerful, powerful.
Economics is the first principle of survival. And your politics, as Dr. Jeffrey says, is your management instrument of your economics, so the distribution would be equitable and fair. And so our ancestors left us a blueprint on how to build society. And I think this film shows very clearly how that blueprint worked in the past and how we built those extraordinary civilizations, not just civilization, but civilizations that last for thousands and thousands of years before it crumbled under the weight of the invasion of cultures that were war cultures moving on us. We were not initially a war culture until we had to respond.
That's powerful,
okay?
Yes.
And in that response, we had to corrupt ourselves in order to deal with the enemy that was coming from outside. But once you corrupt yourself, if you can't reconstruct your spiritual system, then that corruption will end up destroying you. You know? And so there's so much in this thing about how the family is constructed, how the royalty is constructed, how the masses are constructed. Some of the things that many of us think when we think of the pharaoh, the king, the queen, we think in terms of what we see in the British monarchy, these despotic rulers that dominates. Well, those people didn't have personal wealth. The Africans had no personal wealth. They were taken care of by the population. They didn't own anything. Their job was to govern for God on earth. Okay? Whatever we saw as being the divinity, which African language referred to as the totality of creation itself. Those people who we put into the positions we call royal, they had no personal wealth. We took care of them because they took the time to do the research, to do the learning, to learn how to teach the masses how to survive in the ecology they find themselves in. So that the priest and the king and the queen were not being servants to by the masses. They were the servants of the masses. And that's a quite different point of view than Western monarchy takes.
Even the names, we talked about this earlier, even the names, the construct of the names are different than who we are. And as you said, we think with the European mindset, and even when we say king and queen, knowing that we have to come up with terms, and there are terms, there are terms that have to be part of our everyday lexicon, so that we understand what we're truly talking about.
There's a tribe that left Kemet many years ago. They live in Cameroon and Chad today, but the majority of them live in Chad, and they're called the Sarah, okay, the sons of Ra. If you look at all of our leaders in ancient Kemet, they were servants to the divine. The divine wasn't a person in Kemet.
Right.
Okay. Divine was the totality of the universe. So if you're a servant to that totality, that means you're a servant to the least of what that totality has produced. And so when we get the concepts right, then you know how to get the words right. But a lot of times we get caught up on European concepts, trying to explain African concepts, and it doesn't work.
Exactly.
So you have to study African concepts.
I forgot. My name is Chuck Finance. I teach financial literacy. I'm one of the co-founders of Team Success. One of the things that I teach in our financial literacy workshops is something that you taught me: food, clothing, shelter. Explain to us the importance of that and how the documentary is going to put that across so that people can understand those are three things that you need to survive. And we talked about management of wealth.
Right.
How is the documentary putting that across so that we can get it right this time?
Right. You know, something occurs in the world ecologically thousands of years before the first dynasty in Kemet. The Sahara Desert, which was as fertile as any rainforest in Africa, began to dry up. That population, much of them, some went west towards the Atlantic, many went east towards a river that was being formed called HAPI. And they went towards the HAPI in search of food, clothing, shelter, and safety. And so when you study this documentary, you see that what HAPI provides is just that. The sustenance, think of food, clothing, shelter, that's the primary motivation for human behavior. We can talk about, oh, I want to be a doctor, I want to be a lawyer, you're going to college to get some money to buy some food. Now, if you go and get all the money you want, all the reason you don't buy the food, you're going to die, okay? You're going to college, you're getting educated, or you're getting tooled and trained so you can provide a home for yourself and your family. So you can provide the kind of clothing necessary in your environment for yourself and your family. In order to do that, you have to also be able to provide safety for yourself and your family. So once the people began to move towards the HAPI River and use the sustenance and resources of that river to provide the food they need, to grow the crops, to provide the clothing they need, they have to then consider, how do we now provide the shelter and security for ourselves and our families? And that's where organizations come in. That's where culture comes in. Because culture involves everything in your environment. Culture involves your food, culture involves your clothing, culture involves the ecology you find yourself in, culture involves the relationship between man and woman, culture involves the relationship between men and women and women. Culture involves everything that happens in your life. Now, dancing and theater and singing, those are tools of culture. We have been reduced to calling the tools of culture, culture. But those tools are there to convey concepts, ideas, and principles out of culture that you need to learn as your daily habits in order to be able to construct the kind of communities that can provide for themselves.
Your final thoughts on?
Oh, I haven't seen the documentary. It is the best documentary I've ever seen done on ancient Kemet by any standards. And you have the best collection of scholars I've ever seen in any documentary on Kemet. And whoever the photographers are, they were extraordinary. So the message there that walks us through the history and time of Kemet as a result of the HAPI River in producing a civilization based on the economic, politics, and culture of our ancestors is a must watch. It should be watched by families. You should have your children watch this piece. You should be able to have it in your schools. This needs to go even past a PBS display because I've never seen anything quite this wonderful that tells our story so completely. I mean, it's a complete telling of the story, and it doesn't separate Africa into pieces. It brings Kerma, it brings Nubia, it brings Kemet, it brings it all together. It talks about the ecology and the environment of the HAPI and how it creates the natural phenomena that produces this extraordinary civilization undergirded by the economic, politics, and cultural pillars that allow it to last for thousands of years.
Right.
And so I tell everyone, watch the HAPI film. Watch the most extraordinary display of your history and your culture. Watch the most extraordinary display of how one creates a family out of the right ecological phenomena. How do they create from the family neighborhoods and then create communities and then create a nation state and a civilization? And the sustenance from that environmental phenomena called HAPI allows this to be produced.
Wow, wow. Powerful, powerful piece. You've heard from the master teacher. Again, subscribe, ring the chime, make sure that you stay connected with us. If you want to do a private showing or a large showing anywhere in the universe, contact us. All the information is linked down below. And just let us know, and we will be there front and center with the documentary. And again, see this powerful piece. Some people have seen it and they're raving about it. So you want to make sure that you see it so that you know what we're talking about. HAPI is a movement. It's just not something that's going to die and go away. We are here to stay. And we thank Professor. Thank you very much, Professor. Thank you very much.